All right, guys. Welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study of Plain and Simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 20, and we left off, and I want to touch on this again. When I come across passages like this, and I call them glimpses, God gives us glimpses of eternal life. Okay, he gives us. We get a small. Again, I have to say, glimpse. And whenever you wonder, okay, what death is going to be like, and I think all of us at some point could be kind of afraid of death. It's kind of instinctive in us that not to die. You have to. Something has to happen that you override, okay? You override your instinct not to die. And that happens a lot. I mean, despair, crazy, okay? Mental illness, things like that. But let's say, for instance, perfect normal, you're going to avoid death. And one of the reasons, and I think that's a good thing, but the fear of the unknown, something in us to say let's kind of shy away from this. But in Scripture, God gives us a glimpse of why we shouldn't fear death. See, what our faith does, it gives us a glimpse why we don't fear death. And I think all of us have had loved ones who have passed away. And remember, we see it from our perspective in this physical land of the living. But God is, he gives us glimpse as to from the other side. Now, so in Luke, we've seen a couple of scriptures where we saw this other side. For example, the Mount of Transfiguration, where Moses and Elijah, Moses had been dead some 1,500 years, and Elijah had been dead some 800 years. So they show up and talk with Jesus. And they are in full cognitive control, or you could, again, they're talking with him. See, that's a glimpse of what is going to be like after death. And certainly, I haven't heard too much lately, but there was a belief of what is called soul sleep, where some people believe that when you die, you just sleep in the ground. And so they would use such scriptures as that, where the last day Jesus is going to, all that are in the grave, Jesus is going to call and they're going to raise up. I know that's a paraphrase there. And so obviously when Jesus makes a statement like that, he says that in the grave, all are going to come out of the grave, all are not going to come out of the grave. There are an untold number of people who have died in horrible ways, burning, right? Burning, plane crashes, eaten by animals, right? Killed horribly, eaten by animals, right? For example, Jezebel was eaten to the point where, well, I'm trying to think. I don't know if she was even buried. So my point is that there are, of course, people who haven't. They're not going to be in the grave. In other words, they die and then they're buried. So the idea of the term the grave is a euphemism. A general statement. But we see these two great men talking with Jesus. And that's, again, that's a glimpse. So think about this. If you see these two men of the Old Testament talking with Jesus, what will God's Son, born again, what will it be like for us? Then we saw the parable of the rich man and the poor man, and we saw in paradise the two existence. Okay, the two existence. So the point is, as we go through scriptures, and by the way, there's one in the Old Testament where Saul comes back, and again, I just want to say, that story troubles some people. It troubles some people that they and the story goes like this: Saul, who God had pronounced his destruction, he was a wicked man, and God said, "I'm just through with you." And then at one point, God wasn't even talking with him. And so in his distress, he showed again his true colors. So when God doesn't talk with him, he takes matters in his own hand. So he goes to a witch in which he had banned. In other words, he said all the witches were to be put to death. So he finds out there's a witch in Endor. He goes to her and says, "Bring up for me whom I will tell you." He says, "Well, Saul, he put, mediums to death." And he said, "Oh, I got you. And so she brings up Saul. And Saul, she's like, "Whoa," And he said, "You deceived me." Now, the idea is that do mediums, can a medium bring up someone from the dead? Absolutely not. In this particular case, by God's sovereignty, he brought up Saul. Now, some people would say it was a familiar spirit. And so to them, the definition of a familiar spirit is a spirit who pretends to be, who takes the form of a person or some kind of form. But that's not what the Bible said. And of course, when Samuel came up, Samuel had been dead again. He comes up, he goes, why are you disturbing me? And then Saul tells him, God is not talking to me, the prophet's not talking to me. He said, what do you think I'm going to do? And then he pronounces the same judgment. So the question is, would a familiar spirit do that? Okay. But again, you see this, Saul comes up and he says, man, why are you disturbing me? Again, a glimpse. It's all it is. Again, it's a glimpse. So that really we should not fear death. I'm not saying that we should rush into death, but we have nothing to fear with death. And I'll tell you another kind of interesting story. When you go into the first, second, and third centuries, where there was um, Christian persecution, I mean, they were executed by the thousands and in various ways, tortured, died in the arenas and things like that. There was such a zeal for the Lord that a lot of the Christians did not fear death, and that they had the hope of a martyr's crown. And it got to a point where they would, I'm going to say in some cases foolishly, throw themselves into harm's way. Some of the, church leaders say, cool it, guys, you're going to die soon enough anyway. But my point is, they, and back then, of course, in that time period, again, where Christians were labeled the enemy of the Roman Empire, and it was open season on them. And many of them met their death gladly, joyfully. Okay. So, I'm going to start reading at verse 27 again, and then just go on out. I just want to read it because This was such a silly question. He says, some of the Sadducees who say there is no resurrection came up and questioned him. Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother had a wife and dies childless, his brother should take up the wife and produce offspring for his brother. Now, this was a crazy cultural thing. No, and it made its way into the law of Moses. He said, now there were 7 brothers. The first took a wife and died without children. Also, the second, and the third took her, and in the same way, all 7 died and left no children. Finally, the woman died too in the resurrection. Now, this is asked by people who do not believe in the resurrection. You always can know how you can win an argument or debate by the disingenuousness of a person. So, people asking questions they know they don't believe in. He said the resurrection. So in the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For all 7 had married her. And Jesus told them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are counted worthy to take part in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die any more, because they are like angels and the sons of God, since they are the sons of the resurrection. Now let's take a look at something right here. First of all, he says, those who are counted worthy to take part of that age and in the resurrection. He kind of defines resurrection here. Now watch this. The term resurrection means body stand. And so he says that in the resurrection of the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. But you're going to have something better. You're going to have a glorified body. Then he says, for they cannot die anymore. So look at that statement. They cannot die anymore. The resurrection, not just being raised from the dead. Lazarus was raised from the dead. But notice, they cannot die anymore, because they are like angels and are sons of God. Now that's sons of God, since they are the sons of the resurrection. So that promise, as you read in the rest of the New Testament, okay, is an awesome promise, okay, in terms of sons of God. And in fact, in terms of resurrection, as we have bodies like that of the resurrected Jesus Christ. Now, verse 13 says, Moses even indicate in the passage about the burning bush that the dead are raised when he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. Now, Moses calls this, remember, after nearly 500 years after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have been dead. He says he is not the God of the dead, but of the living, because all are living to him. And so they was like, man, whew. So some of the scribes answered, teacher, you have spoken well, and no longer dare to ask him. Now, again, Pharisees saying that because he put the Sadducees to shame, but he also put the Pharisees in their foolishness to shame. so this, it was a very foolish question. It shows their ignorance. These are religious men. Keep this in mind. These are religious men, and showed their very ignorance. All right, but that's, again, a glimpse. It's a glimpse of, that life after death for us. Again, it's great. It's awesome. That in Ephesians chapter 2, it says that we were raised together with Christ and made to sit together in heavenly places with Christ. Think about this awesomeness right here. We were raised with Christ. So when he raised from the dead, we were raised from the dead, and we were made to sit together in heavenly places with Christ. Oh, okay. And so this foolishness of the religion, what promises do you offer again? All right, so verse 41. He says, then he said to them, how can they say that the Messiah is the son of David? For David himself said in the book of Psalms, the Lord declared to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. David calls him Lord. How then can the Messiah be his son? Now, this is a gotcha question for them. They knew the verse, but they had to go, yeah, how is that? Well, the answer is because Jesus took the Lord human form. And thus he has always been Lord, and he takes human form. And that's why David called him Lord. The Lord declared to my Lord, sit at my right hand. God the Father says to Jesus, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Now, obviously, there's a lot more in depth to that. Now, verse 45, he says, while all the people were listening, he said to his disciples, beware of the scribes who want to go around in long robes, who love greeting in marketplace and front seats in the synagogues, in places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and say long prayers for just to show. These will receive greater punishment. Now, this is obviously an abbreviated version of Matthew 23. Remember, Luke is a Gentile writer. His audience is Gentile, while Matthew's audience was Jewish. This is why you see a lot of Jewish references to the Old Testament. And even in Matthew's account of this, he scathes the Pharisees for the hypocrisy. See, and remember, these were the most holy men of the time. In other words, if you were living there, you would have said, you would have treated them like the Pope, his holiness, his innocence, right? You would have what you would have saw is long robes. We see that today, don't we, in churches? You see fancy titles. I am an apostle. No, 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 no. I'm a chief apostle. I'm a prophet. No, 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 no. I'm a master prophet. You look at a lot of pulpits. What do you see? You see these pulpits, even in storefront churches, right? You see pulpits. You see better chairs than the folding chairs in the audience. But of course, the bigger the church, the more grandiose the pulpit. So think about this. Where would you want to sit? And why do you think they have these places of honor? It's to glorify themselves. It's not to glorify the Lord. So notice Luke just kind of gets really kind of the bare minimum right here. He says, beware of the scribes who want to go around in long robes and love greetings in the marketplace. I'll tell you, there are ministers that will correct you if you don't address them with the appropriate title. Beware of the scribes who want to go around in long robes and love greetings in the marketplace, the front seats in the synagogues, and the places of honor at banquets. So you see all this. Human nature rarely changes. But here is the thing. They devour widow houses and say long prayers just for a show. And notice they receive the greater punishment. And that's kind of an understatement, though, for the Pharisees. Their wickedness is so unbelievably wicked. Okay, unbelievably wicked. So, again, if you want a more detailed account, go to Matthew 23. And Jesus really lets them have it. He really cuts into it, lets them have it. So, but anyway, all right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I'll see you in the next study.